In this video, I'll show you how you can load and save data in Radiant. So suppose that we're interested in doing an analysis where we compare means across different groups. Now we could choose the default data set that's loaded with Radiant, which is the Diamond data set. But maybe we want to look at the exact data set that's discussed in the help file. So if we click on this help icon on the bottom left, it'll show us an example, and an example is about a data set called salary. So where is that data set, and how do we get access to it? It's mentioned here. Right? So for example data set, go to Data Manage, select Examples, and press the Load Examples button. Right? So let's do that. So we're in the Data Manage tab, click Examples, and Load Examples. And so now a bunch of data sets are loaded, and one of those is called, salary. Right, so this is information on salaries for professors with different genders and years of service and so on. And so now we can go back to the Compare Means tool. Right, again, we have a help file here that discusses how to analyze this data set, and we can try to replicate that exact analysis. Right? And so, for example, by gender, we can look at the salaries and compare the means across male and female professors. Right? So there's, again, a bunch of different data sets available like this that you can load and look at and play around with the different tools and get a better understanding of how they work. But suppose you want to load some of your own data. How would you do that? Well, there are different ways in which you could do it. The best one is to load data that has been saved in an RData format, and generally that has an extension RDA. Right? So of course that requires that you have data available in that format. But let's say you do. You would just hit Choose Files, and then load, let's say here, the house prices dataset, which is in an RDA format. And if the person who saved the data spent some time with it, he or she hopefully provided a description of that data as well. So you load it up, it tells you something about the prices of houses, and it gives you some information about the characteristics of those houses. Right? But now, suppose that I have data in a different format. Let's say I have it in Excel. How would I get this information from the Excel file directly into Radiant? Now, loading Excel files directly is generally a bit tricky because Excel data files are a proprietary format, so that can be a bit messy. But one thing we can do is we can actually save Excel data sets into a comma separated value format. Right? So if I do Save As within Excel, I can select comma separated value, save the file in that format, and then load that up into Radiant. So let me give you an example of what that would look like. I'm actually going to load a different data set just for illustration purposes. So I'm back in Data and Manage, choose CSV, and then navigate to where the file is, and I'm just going to load this file. Okay. Now, when you're using data that's in CSV format, it will not have a description added to it. Right? That's only possible if you have our data format files, where somebody has gone to the trouble of actually adding a description to it. Okay, now suppose you find that too much hassle, because then I've got to open up Excel, then I've got to save it and that to a CSV and then load it up. Can I just copy and paste? And the answer is yes, you can. So I'm just going to go to Excel, select the data that I want, copy it into the clipboard with Control-C or Command-C, depending on what platform you're on. And then in Data Manage, I'm going to choose Clipboard, and then paste data. And so here is my information on house prices. Okay. What if I want to save the data? I can save it to an RDA format. Again, that's what I would recommend, especially if you've provided a description. Right? You can do that through Add, Edit, Description, and then type in information about the variables in the data. Or if you have it in another format, you can copy and paste it in, and then update description. Okay. So you can save this as an RDA file. By the way, copy and paste is the default name that it will give to any data file that you try to copy and paste through the clipboard. It's probably not a very good name, so let's actually rename it. Let's click on Rename and say House Prices, and then click Rename. All right. So we can save this as an RDA format. We can also save it to a CSV file. But what we can also do is save it to the clipboard. And again, just for illustration purposes, I'm just going to switch to another data set. So this is one we loaded earlier from a CSV file. And I can do this with any data set, by the way, that I want. And I'm going to save that to the clipboard. Copy. And now in Excel, I just do paste, so Control V or Command V, depending on what platform you're on, and there we go. And I can choose any of the data sets that I might have loaded. So let's say I've got this data on direct marketing activities. I want that into Excel for some reason. Clipboard, copy data, put it in a new tab, hit paste, and there you go. All right. What I'd recommend, though, is as much as possible use the R data format. It's going to lead to smaller files because they're nicely compressed. You can add information about the variables and all that's quite convenient. Another type of file that you're going to be loading and saving is a state file. So a state file has both the data as well as any settings that you might have, any analyses, any reports, anything will be put into a state file. So how do I create one of those? The easiest way to do that is to click here on the floppy disk icon and hit Save State. And then it'll ask me where I want to save the state file. Now, I would recommend when you do this, because this is also an RDA extension, is to say something like my file -state. So leave the word state in your file name. So you'll know that that's a state file that you can load back up that has more than just data, it has settings in it as well. Right? So once you've done that, you can then go ahead and load that state file in at any time later on that you want, and you'll get back your exact same settings. Now, suppose that I have a bunch of data loaded in a Radiant session, and I've got a report and a bunch of other stuff that I did, and I want to keep that, but at the same time I want to look at a state file that I saved previously. Now, if I try to load the state file into this current session, it'll erase anything that I've been doing there and recreate exactly this previous state, right? So if I want to keep what I have now and look at a previous state, the way to do that is to create a new session. And that'll open up a new session of Radiant in another tab. And within that session, I can then go ahead and load a state file. So choose File, and let's say I want to choose this one. Now you notice when I open that file, it won't just take me to the default start page, which is Data Manage. It'll take me directly to the last page that I was on when I saved the state file, right, by using Save State. And it'll recreate exactly the setting. So there's a filter set, I created a scatter plot that I split up into different rows, and I had some color added too. Right? So this is exactly the place I left off when I saved that previous state file, and I still have in my other tab all the data and settings that I had from the previous activity I was working on. Right? So nothing has changed here. I just created a new session, right? And in that new session, I opened up the state file.